Welcome to this special Comm.unity hybrid event. I was going to say virtual event, but it's a hybrid event, both here and online. It's great to see you. I hope you're well and I hope you're keeping warm. My name is Mark Jones and I have the pleasure of being your host today for this event, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording this event today. And here in Parramatta, Sydney, they are the Darug people. We celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. We acknowledge and pay respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this virtual event. Again, thank you for joining us, and a little bit about our event today. The Comm.unity series, some of you will know, has been going on for quite some time now, and mostly in a virtual event, so it's really exciting to have people with us here today in Parramatta and online, of course, as well. These events are designed to bring the Space&Co membership together and provide inspirational tools that help you in your professional and your personal lives. And we're really looking forward to this conversation today because, of course, it does span both of those areas. We've got a great panel conversation as an interactive event. It means I am looking forward to your comments, your questions. They'll come through to me. We've got a couple of conversations that we're going to touch on, and I'm looking forward to those. So please do send those comments through in the chat, and the people here with me in the room, don't be shy. For those of you online, by the way, they have snacks. I don't know what you have, but we're quite comfortable here. So if it spans your lunch, don't worry, you're among friends. So as I said, there will be plenty of time for questions. Now, this week, of course, is International Men's Health Week, and it's just really wonderful that we can celebrate that event today and have this conversation. And we're looking to raise the profile on what men's health looks like in the workplace. And the theme for Men's Health Week this year is building healthy environments, I should say, for men and boys. And that means focusing on the physically, mental, emotional and healthy environments that we can create at home and in workplace settings. And importantly, it also means standing up against the stigma and social norms that set the stage for redefining what it means to be a strong man. And of course, we want to encourage men to prioritise their health. It doesn't just mean going to the gym. We're going to take a holistic perspective of that today. And so in honour of this week and this conversation, this topic, we've assembled two amazing leaders that join me here today who come from different industries, and they're going to help facilitate and lead this conversation today. And before we get into some introductions, just a quick comment we want to make here. And on the screen, you'll see a number of organisations that you can be in touch with. It's really important to note that we are discussing a number of topics that are related to anxiety and stress and depression, and some people may find this conversation difficult. So with that in mind, help is available. You can see the services on the screen, and I encourage you to call those if that's appropriate for you. So thank you for your consideration of that. So let's take a deeper look at our conversation topic for today. And as I said, we've got three topics that we want to talk to. The first one is modern masculinity. Great topic. The second one is men's health as a social issue. And then the third is the gender health gap. And look, we could probably talk for an hour on each of these three ones, but we're going to keep it nice and tight. So when we think about these topics, the main point here is that we want to ask employers to take a moment to consider and understand how can they best support their employees' health, all of their employees, of course, and in particular with a focus on men, and how can we create positive workplace environments. We want to encourage open and frank discussions on how we can make a difference in the workplace. And it's time to change how we look at men's health in the workplace. Success and good health are not mutually exclusive. I feel like I need to say that again. Success and health are not mutually exclusive. In fact, we're in an age where we want to bring these together in more meaningful ways. And so with that in mind, we're going to talk with our panellists, Anthony Roberts and Ryan Wolfe, who are here with me to discuss their insights and solutions to promoting a balance between health and work in the workplace, and how we can incorporate flexible working into the workplace and break the stigma of masculinity and men's health. So there's a lot to get through today. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's do some intros. Ryan Wolf is the Operations Manager, New South Wales South for Clontarf Foundation. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
No, thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, a little bit about you for the sake of everybody here. The Clontarf Foundation's purpose is to improve the education, discipline, life, skills, self-esteem and employment prospects for young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men. Working right across the country here in Australia, with the exception of Tasmania, I think. Is that right? Essentially all of Australia, right?
Yeah, Tassie in the ACT.
Yeah, there you go. More than 10,000 participants, more than 520 dedicated staff members, and you've been with them for 13 years, so you're pretty much rusted on at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, 13 years.
But can I just say how much I'm looking forward to your perspective? So again, welcome, thank you. And Anthony Roberts is GPT Group's Space&Co's General Manager of Flexible Workspace Solutions. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you on the panel. And you were previously National Value Experience Manager for Centre Group and Operations Manager with Accor, and you've worked in senior leadership roles in the hospitality and retail industries across Australia, the UK and Canada. So again, great experience, different sector, and I'm looking forward to your different perspectives. Again, welcome.
Yeah, it would be a good chat.
Excellent. Now, would you mind just welcoming to make them feel a bit more comfortable? Yeah. Virtual shout outs and thumbs up on the online would be great too. Now, let's kick off with topic one, modern masculinity. And this is a really interesting one. As a setup for this, the concept of what it means to be a man today is changing all the time, and it's quite a customizable notion. And we hear a bit about toxic masculinity. You don't hear about masculinity in and of itself too often. And so that's a real challenge, because we're talking about, in this context, problematic behaviour relating to these archetypal displays of masculinity. So what do we do about that? There's all sorts of inappropriate behaviours that are associated with this way of thinking, aggression, dominance, and a lack of empathy for other people and themselves. Really the sort of workplace none of us would like to be in. Anthony, to get stuck into this, do you think there is a male stereotype for work and for family?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, but it's a really interesting one, isn't it? I think, absolutely the stereotypes exist. And I think defining what they are, or kind of, narrowing down on what they are, is probably something that I would find much easier to do if you're asking me what did they used to be.
Right.
Or maybe kind of what it is that we're hoping they'll become. I think at the minute it feels to me like we're definitely on a journey on the way through. You kind of mentioned toxic masculinity. It's something that you hear about quite a lot. And it's something that we're all quite astute at calling out these days, even if it's just internally. I think everybody's quite comfortable with this idea of looking at something and going, I'm not sure if that's all right, all right anymore. In particular in the workplace, it's a good, it feels to me like a good and quite frequent conversation that you hear more and more just through, what kind of environment do we want to create? But, does the stereotype exist? Absolutely. What is it right now? It's such a moving piece, and I think it feels to me like it's quite different for your home and your work.
Yes. And I find it interesting too, if we spend most of our time talking about what it isn't, it's hard to describe, as you say, what it is or perhaps what it's becoming. And Ryan, just to throw to you, what's your view on the two? Or maybe there's three or four, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because our role is to provide male mentors to the young men that we work with. Yeah. And we do that because a lot of the young fellas that we haven't got that male figure in their life. So I guess looking at the current workforce and who we put into the schools, we need the most functional men we can find to break down any of these stereotypes that the next generation or the next workforce that are coming through see this normalised behaviour. So within Clontarf, we have a 95% male workforce because the guys on the ground in the schools are men. We've got some females that work for us at our head office in Perth. But we need those guys to I guess, explain through their actions what modern masculinity looks like. And
what are the sort of things they're saying?
I guess it's those lessons on how to be a good bloke. Like a lot of our young fellas are angry young men, so not using your fist to sort your problems out, or when the wheels do fall off, having some guys in their life in the school through Clontarf that can demonstrate how you go about it. And that's not to say that they don't get themselves into situations, the boys, where, you know, they do get themselves into a bit of trouble. But displaying that within the school setting and within our work environments, I guess, normalises the behaviour. So when these young guys are old enough to transition out of school and into the workplace, they're more equipped to deal with their problems in a much more, modern way. Not that anger involved, or the yelling and ranting, and, you know, they're much more well-rounded young fella.
Well, the thing that I picked up from there is this awareness of self and awareness of others, and we talk often about emotional intelligence, or the ability to empathise with other people. Ryan, Anthony, as we reshape what we think this is becoming, what's your sense on the challenge in the workplace? Just picking up on what Ryan said, we're becoming more aware of how we're doing as an individual, as a whole person, right?
Yeah.
How does that work out in the context of masculinity, do you think?
I think it's actually quite similar to what you were saying, right? It really is about, role modelling good behaviour, calling out the good behaviour that you see, that kind of maybe traditional shift from focusing on, the best people, honing in on IQ, and now we're actually really moving into EQ. What can I do to make sure that the environment I curate, is a positive one, is a supportive one, is one that acknowledges and supports differences, one that makes people feel a bit more comfortable to be their whole self. Yes. in the workplace. I don't know, I feel like it's quite similar to what you're saying, but we're really, from a workplace perspective, we're not having to kind of, worry about those instances where this is coming out, but you're definitely looking to shift the dial away from that kind of traditional dominant male behavior, of, owning the boardroom, or being the only voice that speaks, or the important voice being the loudest voice. It's far more, you want that diversity of thought, you want that equity within the room, within the organization, and I think that is a big focus. I know it's certainly, a big focus for us at Space&Co and at GPT, and about just making sure that we are, I guess, helping people to be a well-rounded person and building workplaces that overtly support that. I think that's kind of the important piece for me.
Just to build on this idea of how we move forward, and you sort of touched on a bit of that, it's tempting to say, well, the leaders should set the tone, which they should, but also I think that calling out piece that you mentioned should be something that everybody shares, I would have thought, is that we recognise great behaviour when we see it. I wonder what other types of things that we can suggest to people would be great ways of encouraging a different way of looking at masculinity. And I'm even thinking at the top here, I was talking about, what it means to be strong. It actually, in my view, and this is my personal view, it's actually an act of strength and courage to be a little vulnerable and understand somebody's emotions, as opposed to sort of cover it up with aggression or other forms of behaviour, right? It's a different way of looking at strength. But I wonder what sort of suggestions you might have for, fostering that sort of healthy workplace.
I think encouraging people to be a little bit braver in demonstrating a bit of vulnerability and being okay to, yes, there's the kind of concept that the leader sets the tone. I'm not too sure how much I buy in on that anymore. I think that there is definitely an expectation in leaders to make sure that you really do kind of embody and believe in these kind of right ways of working. You've got to be able to kind of, walk in and talk it. But really, men's health, is all about what are we all doing to support each other, and that is about everybody just kind of taking, I think, those opportunities just to be a little bit braver, to show a little bit more vulnerability, to kind of, I'd encourage everyone to think, next time you're in one of those situations where, maybe you're seeing something that, again, it kind of triggers you internally to think, I'm not sure if that is the environment that we want to be in anymore. You don't have to kind of counter that with similar behavior. Perhaps you can just be a bit more overt in your vulnerability, in your, be a bit more confident in your style. If you can be just a little bit more brave and just, demonstrate, I guess, what we feel is the right way of kind of approaching those situations. Perhaps you can kind of encourage a new type of conversation or a new way of working through being a bit more overt with a positive way rather than necessarily trying to be someone who counters the negative way.
So if anyone's listening and they're feeling a little uncomfortable right now, because we're talking about vulnerability and being challenged effectively in our style, and we'll go to questions in a minute. I'd love to get questions coming through from the audience both here as well. But did you have anything to add? Because I think you've probably got a lot of really hard practical experience around that, right? How do we get people to really acknowledge how they're actually doing?
Yeah. And when you're, I guess, dealing with men, it still is a bit of a challenge, isn't it, for us to be vulnerable or admit that, these are my downfalls or that I'm, struggling with something. I think what we try and encourage within Clontarf is, because we do have just so many small pockets of staff working together, anywhere between 2, and our bigger academies maybe have the biggest have 10 guys working together. That ability to communicate if you are frustrated, or because I think the way guys work a lot of the time is just bring it up, let's have a chat about it. It doesn't need to be that aggressive, like why did this happen yesterday, or why did you do that, or whatever. But and we always try and relate it back in our work to what's in the best interest of the young fellas that we're dealing with. So if we let this bubble away and we start to get frustrated with one another, that's not in the best interest, because the boys will pick up on that. But also, going back to what we said before, we're role modelling how they should sort their issues out as well, so that next generation that comes through into the workforce, it's just normal. Yeah. If you've got some beef or whatever with another fellow staff member, or you're struggling with something, don't feel as though you can't talk to your colleague and say, hey, I need a hand with this, or we need to have a chat about this to sort it, nip it in the bud now.
Yeah, great. Anyone here with a question? Don't be shy. Question on the topic? It's a big one. Okay, well, I have one here from online. You'll have to be quick next time. Faster next time, because the online comes through. What are some concrete examples of what are some concrete examples of times you've called out negative actions or shown vulnerability? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'm happy to share one, and I don't know if I'm answering the question, because it's not a time that I did it, but it's a time that kind of resonates with me. I used to work with a lady called Michelle, who moved roles and kind of took on a senior role. And Michelle had a very soft style. It was very kind of inclusive. It was encouraging. It was always very collaborative. And she stepped into this role, leading the state. And I remember the very first time that we kind of had an all-team meeting, and there were a lot of voices. It was a contentious topic. And this natural thing happened where everybody in the room acknowledged that we were not getting to the consensus that we needed to get to, and turned to Michelle. And Michelle sat back and went, no, don't look at me. I am not the person with the best insight in the room here to make this decision. We've got the experts are the people sat, she really just empowered everybody in the room to acknowledge the fact that we had, subject matter experts, be it leasing, customer experience, whatever was going on, we had experts in the room, and she just didn't take that role. She didn't turn around and say, well, yes, I am the most senior person, so I'm going to make the decision here because you're not able to. It was a moment where she kind of grounded everybody and went, no, I don't hold the IP because I'm the most senior person. That doesn't mean I'm the decision maker. It means I'm the curator. I'm the person who says, your behaviours right now, not amazing. They're not getting us to where we need to be. And looking to me to solve that for you, not going to happen. I'm not making the call. And she just really embodied that. Somebody could have looked at that and went, but you're the boss. That kind of traditional thinking. And she was, again, just, collaborative, engaging. She brought people together, but in a way that said, just because I'm the most senior person in the room doesn't mean that I'm making the decisions here. You hold the IP. Let me just help foster a great conversation. That vulnerability that she showed in saying, I'm not the expert, you guys are the experts.
It's a really great story because it's addressing both a difficult situation and a great example of leadership that, quite frankly, anybody can learn from. That's really good. We're going to move on to the next topic in a minute if you guys haven't got any questions here. I'm putting them on the spot, you see. But that's okay. All right, we're going to move on because we've got more great conversations to come here. Men's health as a social issue is our second topic. And the question is this: if you had to choose, what would you rather be, healthy or successful? This is a bit of a a polar dynamic, as it were. For many men, this is a decision that heavily affects their career and personal well-being. And there's this pressure in a cultural script sense that masculinity dictates how men must be self-reliant, tough, and strong 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in the workplace, these traditional tropes have the power to become more than just stereotypes. They're a rule book that, if not consciously, subconsciously have to be followed to a T. And from an early age, there is still, unfortunately, this script which teaches men that in order to be respected, they must man up. And I've seen some statistics that speak to this. We're taught that men don't cry, that they should suck it up, go eat some concrete. Don't say you're stressed or sick, but certainly don't have feelings. Emotions make us weak. And this is a really negative cultural aspect that can really unfortunately saturate many businesses. And it's a byproduct of managers that expect their employees to forgo good health for the sake of the organisation's success. And it really does put men at risk. Right, well, Anthony, with that big setup, what's happening to the traditional male stereotype in the workplace in that context? Because unfortunately, some of those things still exist, and we've touched on this, but just to sort of build on that idea of what's happening, how are we wrestling with it, do you think?
There's been a big generational shift, and I think that we're still kind of seeing that play out, and I think we will for quite some time to come, where, everything that you kind of touched on there, it does still exist. We do still see it, but we are seeing far more, impact from people coming into businesses or, starting to move up into kind of managerial and leadership roles, who are wanting to see that change in modern masculinity within the workplace, and, being able to articulate that the success or health are not mutually exclusive of each other anymore. I think, we're coming off the back of COVID, and that's had a massive impact as well. So, we've got a kind of fresh group of people coming into the workforce who have new expectations and are quite comfortable to articulate those expectations of a business. That I find these days in any interview that we have for new people coming into the business, it's a two-way interview.
Yes.
Talk to me about, the skills that you bring, and talk to me about your experience. And when we finish that, what I get back is, now talk to me about the culture of the organization. Talk to me about, your kind of health practices. Talk to me about what it is, what kind of a workplace would this be, because I want to know if this is right for me. And we're really having like a two-way conversation now about kind of workplace culture, and is this the right place for me to come in, which is absolutely generational shift. But, COVID impact says that we really are, kind of constraint on resource. Everybody is looking for good staff these days, and you have to be able to put your best foot forward as an employer, as an organization, to make sure that, you really are a great workplace to be, for the kind of prospective employee to choose, because they do have choice. And
with this concept of how is it changing, it seems to me there's two parts to the interview, as you suggest, right? And it would be strange if you didn't get grilled on your culture.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they have questions about how we treat employees, for example? That's a big change, I'd suggest, over the last, probably even in the last, few years with COVID, as you suggest. I've got some questions coming through as well, but I just wanted to get, we're talking about, Ryan, your work, but you've also got a large staff of mostly men, right? So what's your experience in that context? Just picking up on what Anthony said there about either interviewing or the dynamics within the organisation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Clontarf has a quite unique way of finding staff, and we have this ethos whereby wherever an academy hasn't been running well, it's not an issue with the program, it's an issue with the delivery. So we have to find the right guys to run our programs, otherwise they tend not to work. So having worked for the foundation over the last 13 years, I know when I came on board, it was a coffee in a cafe and here's the job, you seem like a good bloke, and you go try your best. But that's when we had maybe 50 guys working for us. Now we're 550.
Yeah.
You can't rely on that anymore. But what we still do the same is we never advertise our positions. What we rely on is the people that already work for us, or people that know us and understand us, recommend people and put people forward. So what we tend to find is that by the time a lot of these people are getting to interview time, they already have an understanding of Clontarf, the way we go about things, the culture, all that type of stuff. And we know that they've been put forward from a guy that we already trust, whether he works for us or a school principal or something like that. But 100%, the actual interview process has changed so much from that coffee that I had all those years ago to very much a conversation like this. All right, you know, tell us a little bit about what you know, what we do. Now we want to know about you, and we actually started by saying, look, it isn't a grilling for the next hour. Let's have a conversation to see whether this is going to work.
So, what questions are you asking about their own self-care, for want of a better phrase? But we're talking about men's health as a social issue, and quite clearly the workplace has a significant influence on that. But I presume you're looking for men that have that broader perspective on health. Is that part of the criteria?
Yeah, not so directly, but I think there's definitely questions within the interview process that touch on that. You know, tell us about a time you've overcome conflict at work. Tell us a time where you've had to show initiative to, solve a problem. You know, all these type of things which subtly show you as, you know, the potential employer, whether this guy's got in his kit bag the ability to, you know, work through an issue, or, you know, tell us more about how did you go about that. You know, did you lose your cool in that situation? Or, you know, how did you, who did you engage with? You know, what resources did you use to help you get through that? So all those type of things which indicate to us that he's going to be a good person to put in front of, you know, adolescent boys.
And more broadly for both of you, what have you observed in other workplaces, either through partner organisations or, you know, other sources of information? What do you think men's mental health looks like in the workplace these days?
I think there's some really good examples for me within kind of the Space&Co community of businesses who are really now looking for ways to kind of bring health to the forefront. You know, people who are asking us, you know, when they come through for a tour of Space&Co, and they, you know, well, what are the health, you know, what are the opportunities like, you know, is it Pilates classes in the morning? Is it, you know, and we do, you know, we have spaces within our buildings which are dedicated to exercise, to, you know, be it morning Pilates, be it afternoon yoga, you know, whatever it is that we're putting on. And they're all examples of real things that are happening within the building. That question is coming through now as part of, you know, people coming into a Space&Co and trying to ascertain, are we the right, you know, kind of location for them to bring their people, because they understand that it's such an important part that they can, you know, heighten awareness and provide opportunities for their team to kind of engage on a health level, as well as just going, you know, tell me about your Wi-Fi speed and all of these other things, you know, like, and we really are now seeing that we're at a real kind of balanced conversation of the two. It's really, really healthy and encouraging to see, and I think, you know, we should all be kind of probing a little bit further into that. And saying,
it used to be just, you know, how good are your end of trip facilities? The end, right?
It was a tick box,
right?
And it's not anymore. It's a real...
Do you have a dodgy bathroom in the basement? That was basically...
a couple of bike racks, and it is so much more, and the spaces are used, they're utilised. You know, people are able to dedicate time, you know. Again, I kind of talk to Space&Co and GPT, but, you know, what a kind of great moment when you can block out time in your diary to make sure that you go for that walk at lunchtime. Or, you know, that you do something that, you know, for me, I finish work at 5, and that allows me to kind of get to a gym class that I need to, you know, to stick to the old New Year's resolution and make sure that I do my bit to invest in that.
It's June. You're doing so well. Can I just say? I'll just jump in.
Do you know what it is? It's peer pressure from my peers who, you know,
some of whom are here, I think.
Don't forget, you've got something at 5:30, but it works, right? We all kind of hold each other to account. But, you know, if you're in an organisation where you can do that, where you can say, no, I'm finishing at 5 because I want to be somewhere at 5:30. You know, that flexibility piece.
Really good.
Is such an investment.
Did you have a quick comment on that sort of shift that's going on there?
Yeah, a little bit. I think there's just been a shift in the understanding around having to present the best version of yourself in order to, in the work that we do, provide that to the young boys you're working with. But I think in any job, and that's not to say that if there's things going on at home or whatever that you haven't, that you can't walk into, put the Clontarf hat on for the day and leave that to the side. But and I think the last 2 years during COVID's definitely helped the shift a little bit. I mean, it took a lot of things away from us, but I think it also provided us with this opportunity. I know just within Clontarf, our boss in New South Wales provided a lot of like online Zooms for, I think we had the coach from the All Blacks, and Kerry O'Keefe was good for a laugh, but it was all these things, like there was an understanding that everyone was doing it really tough, not just Clontarf, everybody. But rather than work going, oh, well, we're all in the same boat, get on with it. That ability, I think, to go, well, what can we do? Our hands are tied to a certain extent, but just that love and care, I suppose.
Look, I think the fact that it's okay you're not having a great day is a big deal. That's what I picked up from your story. Look, a quick comment here from Zoom, and have a listen to this question. With men being more likely or prone to bottling up concerns, how can workplaces, peers, anyone else around them encourage them and make them feel more comfortable to opening up? It's a tough thing to do in the workplace. It's a nice little follow on from the, okay, so you're not doing well today. Next, now what? That's hard. Like the balance of, does the person want to be left alone? Are they looking for the classic "Are you okay?" style conversation? What are your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the work that we do, we're confronted with some pretty full-on situations. We can walk into all sorts of stuff and some pretty horrific things as well. So it's naive to think that our workers at certain times don't need to speak further. And I think just the environments that we create in the small teams, whereby everyone's sort of working towards that common goal. I get the feeling that most guys have someone, at least one person within our foundation, where you can go and have a chat. There's no stigma involved.
Yes.
I think guys in general are just getting a better understanding that the best thing to do is talk. That old sort of mentality of bottling it in.
And look, we're used to that dynamic in the different services, police and healthcare and so forth, where it's very much necessary, but now what we're recognising, that's actually a universal concern, right? So just very briefly, any thoughts on that one? It's a big question.
I think we're focusing on people as a whole person, and be it the ability to just say, well, I'm taking a mental health day today. We have mental health days, that you can just, if you need a day to be able to do that, then absolutely. And as leaders, how do you make sure that everybody is aware of these things? But just conversations, you're spot on. I think it is the best way. How do you just sit more often, talk to people, and it doesn't have to be off the back. There doesn't have to be a major catalyst to it. We can just sit and talk.
Okay, let's move to topic number 3. We've got some more questions coming through as well, so we'll pick them up as we go along. Our live studio audience is still being a little shy. You've got a question, let's go.
Yes. Going back to the health versus success topic, do either of you have an example of when you sacrificed one to prioritise the other? And if so, what was the impact and what were the learnings from that situation?
Stumped them. Yeah. Such a.
That's all right. You can come back to it.
Yeah. Look, and on the chat, by the way, put down some comments as to your own experience there too. I think it'd be great. And we've given you more thinking time.
Yeah. No. I was probably going back to the physical health. I think in my own experiences, I've sort of worked my way up to a managerial level. I think what comes with that, for me anyway, was a bigger geographical spread. So in terms of looking after the physical health, and just subconsciously, I didn't realise that the extra time in the car and the nights away in the motels and all that type of stuff was meaning that, career-wise, I was going really well, and everyone, you're doing great stuff there, Ryan. But physically, not making sure that the gym was getting, swiped a few times a week, or the runners were getting worn out and all that type of stuff. So, I had a sort of a light bulb moment probably halfway through COVID where that had slipped. I hadn't even realised. I guess the success had probably got in the way of the health, and probably similar to the family setup as well, and how that probably relates more of a, I don't know, probably mental health type thing, you know, knowing that you are providing, but not, you know, just a wage and food on the table, but you're providing what you need to as a father, and, you know, physically being there enough, and, you know, if the assembly's on tomorrow, that you might not be able to get to all of them, but, you know, make an effort to prioritise that with the other stuff that's going on as work as well, because it's busy, but you need to find a way to fit it all in, because all of a sudden your kids have, you know, too old and they don't want dad hanging around anymore, and you've missed it. So, yeah, I suppose that's a couple of examples of how I've had to find the balance. Yeah.
Look, yeah, I think I've definitely hit a tipping point probably a couple of times in the past that I think I have probably learned enough from now to not do again, where you think that you can, you know, you think that you're just so resilient and you can work and you can work and you can, you know, oh, I'll go home and I'll do a little bit more. You know, the fact that your computer or your device can come home with you from the workplace is, you know, it's a blessing and a curse from time to time. And I don't know, I just found myself, it's happened a couple of times where I find myself just getting more and more removed from, you know, be it social interactions, checking in with family, you know, all of those kind of good things, because you've really knuckled down and prioritized work way too far over health. And I start getting some of those telltale signs where I realize, you know, it might be a couple of weeks until since I've put a call in to people back at home, like my family are back in the UK. You know, you have to kind of make overt, you've got to book in time, right? There's time, there's all these things that you've got to do, and I find that they start slipping off, and you realize, okay, no, I've kind of got the balance out of whack again. I think, you know, there's a bit of a self-awareness piece, but it's also probably just good to have people around you. There's no one ever quite like your parents probably to go, you haven't called in a couple of weeks. You know, sometimes you need some people to kind of give you a little tap back on track. But, you know, I think that as we start to understand more about, you know, you are a better professional when you are a full, well-rounded person.
Yes.
You know, that you have to make sure that you give time to all of the home stuff as well, so that you can be your best self at work. And I think that has helped me steer myself away from not doing that anymore, I hope.
And, you know, calendarizing, if you like, the personal things as well, so that everything gets done. That's for me the key, right?
Yeah.
If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen, including the gym. So, and calling your mum, by the way.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Good tip there. Where time runs away, as it always does. So I do want to get into topic number 3, and thank you for your question, by the way. Gender health gap. The health gaps are the differences in the prevalence of disease health outcomes or access to healthcare across different groups. And there's a study by Manual, which is a wellbeing platform for men, that found out that in many countries, men are more likely to face greater health risks. In short, male health gaps seem to stem from societal pressures that are damaging men the world over. And I find it interesting that traditional masculinity is itself toxic. There's a lot going on there. And there's some statistics from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare that are, I think, interesting to reflect on in this conversation. And just a couple of them. More than 6 out of 10, or 62% of people who die prematurely in Australia are male, and men under 75 are twice as likely to die than women from preventable causes. Another interesting one here is that according to the National Men's Health Strategy from 2020 to 2030, released by the Australian Government, approximately 1.5 million Australian males over the age of 18 have self-reported a mental or behavioural condition. That's self-reporting, by the way, so as we know, men don't report anything, so it's got to be a lot more than that, unfortunately. And of course, the suicide, unfortunately, this is a really significant one. 75% of deaths are male, and men account for a whopping 94% of workplace fatalities. So, you know, that's a shocking statistic. And of course, coronary heart disease, lung cancer, and other things, death rates in males are much higher. So, look, none of that is, you know, that's all very sobering, right? So I think in that context, what are some things men can do to adopt to improve their health? And I think this is where we're really looking for some very practical strategies. We did touch on that with the calendaring and the, phoning your mother, etc. But I
Yeah.
think there's other things that we can do in the workplace as well to encourage each other to set up the sort of culture and the space. I think also where we can just take this a lot more seriously. I think for men it can be this is a nice to have, something I should do, as opposed to no, you really need to do this. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think exactly that. I mean, we have to put it into practice, and I think if I kind of take anything away from these chats, it's that this has to be like an always-on piece.
Right.
We don't talk about this for this week and then we put it back in the box and we come back to this, idea of actually discussing men's health and men's mental health same time next year. How do you, in your, again, this isn't within the workplace. It's not something that has to be leader-led. It doesn't have to be an initiative. I feel, don't let kind of this, striving for perfection get in the way of what is just progress steps. Just having conversations, normalizing that. Be it, like you said, just sitting down and having a bit of a chat, or be it putting time in with peers. If you've got to use the diary as your mechanism to kind of kick things off, then let's just start putting some kind of routine chats in there. Just time to be able to go and, walk and talk or grab a coffee. Do what you need to do just to it's important. Check in on your friends, check in on your colleagues.
Yeah, and Anthony, what about young men in that context? Those of us who are a bit more grey and aged can kind of have a different concept to that than younger people. You got any thoughts there?
I think, again, being overt in gestures around kind of embracing the kind of, younger workers' desires within the, for the workplace that they want to see. I remember a kind of past colleague talking to me about this concept of reverse mentoring, where, some of the kind of older, more senior people within a business were kind of shoulder tapping the 24, 25-year-olds and literally getting that reverse mentoring where they're saying, tell me a bit more about, how your world works. How is this big, sometimes clunky organization that we're in, that is difficult to kind of change? How is it working or not working for you, and what, what does good look like to you? There's so many kind of mechanisms for kicking off what is essentially just a really kind of powerful conversation. I think it's it often falls on, again, I'm really happy to kind of put out there examples of times where I've gone and spoken a little bit more often, or the benefits that I've seen, because I think if I can share that with people, then maybe it will encourage some of the younger ones who come into an organization and have this idea that maybe I kind of can't put my whole self on the table because that might be a career limiter for me, or maybe people will see that as
that's a really good point.
Weak or
yeah,
something.
You're normalising it. Yeah. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd probably go from the perspective of the young students that we're working with, and at Clontarf we kind of feel that education is the key to better health outcomes. And I think because when you look at it, there's a big difference between being unemployed and being unemployable. And so when you look at some of those pretty ordinary stats, when you translate them into what young Aboriginal fellas are dealing with, they're worse even again. But what we've found and what we've sort of realised over the last 20 years is if these young fellas can get through school, educated and then into work, that those terrible stats that we hear about start to diminish. Because you're educated, you're providing, your mental health's better because you've got money coming in, you've got purpose, you're a good dad, you're a good father, you're paying off your house, you're leading what we'd call a normal life. You're more educated, so you're making healthier choices, you've got money to make healthier choices, you stay engaged in sport for longer, and your mental health's better because your life is all sort of lined up where it should be. So that's why we're so driven to make sure that every one of the young 10,500 boys that we work with are graduating with a HSE through New South Wales or whatever it is, depending on your jurisdiction.
Yep.
And then into employment, because what we've seen is, those stats improve.
So staying there with you, Ryan, do you believe that society or the system is responsible for this health gap? And, are there some ways that we can lessen the gap? And I guess that's for you, both Indigenous as well as all of Australian society, particularly as it concerns men?
Yeah. So I don't think that education thing's an exclusively Aboriginal thing. I
No.
think any young person, they're a lot better equipped to lead a healthy life if you get through school and you're employed and you're in a job that you love, or tertiary trained, or whatever
Yep.
it might be.
Yep.
I guess with a lot of the young men that we work with, their parents' experience with school was pretty ordinary. We have come a long way, but schools are a lot better now and better equipped to help and guide young Aboriginal kids through to the end of school. So I guess when we look at the system, I guess, it probably does make it a bit tough, because a lot of these kids are doing this for the first time. The amount of times we run our graduation ceremonies at the end of the year, and there's mums and dads crying in the front row because this is the first person in my family that's gone and got
Yes.
their HSC, and I know what that means. I know that means he's either going to uni next year,
Yep.
or Clontarf have helped set him up
Yep.
a job, or whatever it is, and the flow on from that is, the better health outcomes. I know he's going to have money to look after himself. I know that he's going to be happy, all of those type of things. So, yeah, I mean, going back to the question, the system is still a work in progress, but it's getting better.
Anthony, what's your take on some of the causal factors here, be it society or the system, or the unfortunate workplace structures that sometimes still exist? What do you think we've really got to address from a critical perspective?
I think we have to make sure that we're kind of really focused and engaged on setting up, is it process, is it framework? How do we make sure that as workplaces and employers we are, engaging to bring in this kind of great workforce that is, you're doing so much work to prepare kind of, these young guys to be kind of, great additions to the workforce. It's a two-sided solution, I guess, in making sure that we are engaging in the right way, and that we are setting up the right environments that, that the next generation of workers can come through and thrive as well, which is, is all of this kind of good stuff about making sure that everybody is able to bring their whole self, that everybody is able to, get that kind of health and success, benefit that you can really feel like, that if you're working for all of these hours in a corporation, then, yes, absolutely you're getting paid, but what else are you getting out of this? How is it enriching my, kind of whole self? And, hearing about all of the investment in the kind of next generation that's coming through.
Yep.
We're building expectation in what the world that they're going to enter into is going to look like, and then we've kind of got our piece to play in making sure that, as an employer, we meet you in the middle. We come to the party in setting up really great workplaces, be it physical spaces, be it just great policies, great, leaders, people who genuinely are invested in making sure that when you come in, you're kind of here to stay, and you're going to have a really good time. That it's a two-way exchange.
That's really important. Now, question from Zoom: could the panel share any suggestions for how parents of young boys can keep them talking and build good sharing habits? Wow.
Yeah, I suppose working in the space, as well as having teenage kids myself, what we I'll use an example of what we explain to schools when we first go to a new school and we're setting up a program. We sort of draw up a pyramid on the screen, and we say that any young boy, and we'll say 15 for example, has two people in their life that they have or they see with authority and are also judgmental, and that's home and school.
Yep.
So when you're at home, you've got to clean your room, you've got to go to bed at a certain time, you can't go on your phone after 7 o'clock, yada, yada, yada. When you're at school, you've got to go to maths, you've got to go to English, you've got to take your hat off when you walk into the room.
Yep.
And around about that age, you also find a third party. Now, in Clontarf, we kind of feel as though we'll be the third party at the school, but it could be your footy coach, a cool uncle that you have, and it can be good or bad. But these people are seen without authority and without judgment. And a really easy example is that young fella goes home, his room's an absolute pigsty. Mum goes, get in there and clean that room. I'm not cleaning the room, you're always telling me what to do. Puts on his McDonald's clothes, goes to his part-time job and gets asked to scrub the McDonald's toilets. Yeah, no worries, boss. Straight up and starts, I know what I'd rather be cleaning. But that young fella has found his third party. So I think, and it's difficult sometimes as parents, we obviously want to raise our kids so that they can talk to you about anything. But we were all that age once, and some things are just awkward to talk to your parents about. So I think encourage them as much as possible to be that friendly parent, but also knowing that there are going to be certain times where hopefully he's got that good third-party role model in his life.
Yes.
And you may have a relationship there as well, whether it's
Yes.
the footy coach, where you're comfortable enough for him to come to you and say, hey, look, young Ryan had a chat to me this week and let's work together and make sure everything's okay. So it's that old notion of it takes a community or a village to raise a child.
Yes.
I think that still stands.
I couldn't agree more. I actually have 3 boys of my own, and 2 of which are in that space, and the model, the role model, is really critical. It's quite heartbreaking as a dad too. It's like,
yeah, you can only do so much.
But there's a nice segue there to the workplace too, which is that we've touched on it a couple of times. Mentoring, relationships, which are both traditional mentoring and reverse mentoring. I just love that idea that we're normalising that as a go-to. It's a bit like having your best friend at work, regardless of who they are, that open and safe relationship. And I think that's a really key aspect of that. Now, there's another question here. How do you think we can incorporate vulnerability and safe spaces into everyday work culture?
Continuing to role model, to normalise. I've shared a bit of this kind of story before where I think I've myself had a bit of a learning moment where I've, in past employment, unfortunately, I've had a couple of suicides within my team. Be it kind of the team or the extended team, and that has such an impact on everyone that is around you. But I think that this for me was really one of those moments that defined how to handle it well, or how to not handle it well as an individual. So I kind of recall the first time that there was a suicide within the team, and you kind of immediately go into kind of process mode, almost, of like, right, how do I share this with the team? How do I make sure everybody within the team is looked after? How do I bring in our EAP provider? How do I make sure that everyone has a chance to absorb the news in a way that is respectful to them and their style? And I went through all of these steps, processes in making sure that we'd kind of done all of that with the team. But at no point did I kind of include myself, I guess, in the considerations list. You kind of spend all of this time looking after everybody else, but I didn't talk to anyone, and just kind of, I guess, somewhat bottled it up, repressed it, kind of pushed it away a little bit. And unfortunately, a couple of years down the line, the same thing. There was another suicide where you kind of go through the process of talking to everyone, and I remember having this grounding moment of I can't handle this the way I handled the last one, in terms of kind of how I didn't consider myself in making sure everybody was kind of somewhat looked after.
Yes.
And it didn't go too well. So, I mean, everybody was again looked after, and I remember kind of getting in the car, driving home, and just thinking to myself, God, I'm not feeling okay about this one. And there was all of this stuff that, had been kind of repressed from the last time around. And I called my kind of colleague and friend at work, and just said, hey, we'll just have a bit of a chat while I'm driving home. And it all came out. I remember being in the car. I pulled up on the side of the Monash Freeway in Melbourne. Yeah. And I am...
You're a mess.
Bawling my eyes out. Yeah, absolutely. But all of that to one side, it was just such a good conversation. And now I can talk about it quite openly and quite freely because I did that piece of talking to someone.
Yes.
I felt so different in myself, and the fact that I feel like I'd kind of, invested in myself, looked after myself a little bit, in talking to someone, who was kind of just outside the circle, was able to just listen without judgment, was able to let me get it all out there, help me process what was going on, so that I kind of left that second situation a far better rounded person than I did the first time around, where I'd kind of repressed it all and it was just waiting to kind of come back out again. And I share that with the pure purpose of, I guess, hoping that, maybe somebody else who is going through something similar, maybe something completely different, but something that you know, if you sat back and looked from the outside and you observed yourself, you say, am I repressing what's going on? Am I talking about this? And if you're not, then you probably should. Make it family, make it a colleague, make it an EAP provider, make it anyone. But that process of kind of just having a bit of a conversation, it links back to everything that we've spoken about, you know, just the power of, if, you know, I guess sometimes you've kind of got to own it for yourself. Maybe somebody's not going to be there shoulder tapping you saying, hey, do you fancy a chat? You got to be okay as well. And I was okay and so much better for sitting back and just calling somebody and saying, hey, I actually need to talk. You know, sometimes you take control of it yourself.
Anthony, thank you sincerely for sharing that story, and I hope it encourages a lot of people to take a similar step to call somebody. And it also reminds me of the importance of having trusted friends at work, as well as, of course, in all of our lives, and just how powerful that is as a practical thing that we can do. Knowing that either I'll be there for that person or vice versa. It's really important. Now, we are about to wrap up. Do you guys have any bursting questions? No? Good. Because I need you to wrap up. So good answer this time. Just a very, one-liner. What are you taking away from our conversation today, Ryan?
There's still a shift happening, and a positive one. I think that we're all very in tune that the old school way of doing things, isn't going to cut it moving forward. But I think everyone's on. Most people are driven to make sure that going to work every day is a fun and inviting and safe thing to do. So.
Yeah. How about you, Anthony? What are you taking away?
Just being, I guess like kind of happy and positive about seeking out the quiet voices in the room, making sure that, we're inviting everyone to the table about this conversation. Like it's important, it's powerful. We're setting up better environments for everyone just to be a better person.
Yes.
Which is, like you say, the shift has started.
Yes.
It was very easy to define what it was, and I think we're all a bit comfortable in defining where we need to get to.
Yes.
We're definitely on that kind of process, and good conversations like this and more people tapping more people on the shoulder is an amazing way for us to keep it going.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll share my quick reflection too. And for me, it's quite amazing to think about men in the context of work and the journey that we're all on, and remembering that there is this rare privilege in the workplace to know that when we have these sorts of open conversations, it's good for men, it's good for the whole organisation, but it's not just for the organisation's own end, it's for their family, their partners, their connections, and it has that flow and effect to, that impact to all of society. And so in that context, for me, this is a really profound moment. So can I just thank both of you for being on the panel today? Do you want to give these guys a clap for an online? Yeah, thank you, Ryan and Anthony, for joining us today, and a big thank you to our virtual audience as well for joining us. We've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Can I just remind you too, if this has brought up some issues for you, we shared a bit earlier on the screen. We do encourage you to call some of the services, whether it's Lifeline or Beyond Blue. There's men's health lines. There's all sorts of different organisations. If that is you and you're thinking about that, of course, borrowing from the incredible wisdom of our panel, talk to somebody, maybe the person sitting next to you, and get that help. But otherwise, thank you so much for being part of today's Space&Co Comm.unity event. It's wonderful to be able to host these organisations for members. I encourage you to take the advantage to share some stories from today with your friends. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again very soon.